Welcome to the Workology Podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrill, founder of Workology.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of Workology.
Welcome to a new series on the Workology Podcast that we are kicking off that focuses on the future of work. This series is in collaboration with the Partnership on Employment and Accessible Technology, or PEAT. You can learn more about PEAT at peatworks.org. Everywhere I turn, there seems to be conversations in the human resources and recruiting industry centered around artificial intelligence. It is truly permeating our landscape, and myself, along with PEAT, found some pretty amazing things that researchers are doing in the fields of accessibility and technology. One of those emerging technology fields is in the area of touchscreen technology, allowing those with motor impairments to be able to use and access technology. Today I'm joined with Martez Mont. Mr. Mont is a 6-year PhD candidate at the Information School at the University of Washington, where he is a member of the Mobile Accessible Design Lab. His focus is designing touch interaction techniques for people with motor impairments and also for people under the effects of situational impairments. Martez, welcome to the Workology Podcast.
Hi, Jessica. It's great to be here.
Talk a little bit about your background, because this is really, I spent some time digging into what you're working on. It's really interesting.
So my background, I have a computer science background. So for my undergraduate and master's degrees, I received in computer science at Bowling Green State University in Bowling Green, Ohio. And while I was at Bowling Green, I started working with a research group there, and they were working on how to make video games more accessible to people with different type of visual impairments. And that just got me really interested in the accessibility space overall. It kind of opened my eyes to different design problems and challenges that I wasn't aware of beforehand. So after my experience at Bowling Green, I knew I wanted to go do a PhD because I wanted to continue to do research and build on these technologies. So that led me to the University of Washington at the Information School, where I'm advised by Professor Jacob Robrock, and I'm a member of his Mobile Accessible Design Lab.
Can you talk to our podcast listeners more about your work in improving artificial intelligence with those with motor impairments?
Yeah. So what my work looks at for my dissertation, what I'm really trying to do is I want to be able to improve the access of touch-enabled devices for people with motor impairment. So touch-enabled devices could be things like your smartphone or your tablet. It could be the public kiosks at the grocery store or at the airport. And what we really want to do is we want to be able to create experiences for people that match their abilities. So when we approach technologies, we approach them with a certain assumptions, I guess. And what happens is that people may not always match the assumptions that technology makes about them. So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to train systems to be able to react to people as they are. So in the case of touchscreen technologies, people with Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis or cerebral palsy may touch in different ways that the system isn't expecting. So what we want to do is, instead of telling the user, hey, this system is inaccessible to you, you need to go find some workaround to make it accessible, we kind of want to flip that. We want to kind of place the burden of adaptation on the system. So we can use machine learning to be able to do that. So machine learning, kind of in more general purposes, might be used by like businesses or corporations to, let's say, figure out something about the browsing behavior of their customers. So if you're Amazon and you really want to understand what book preferences I have, you might use some data about which books I've bought in the past or what my browsing history might look like. And then that allows you to make some predictions to say, hey, Martez, based on your past browsing history and your past purchasing history, these are some books that might be of interest to you. So what we want to do is we want to train these systems to react to people's not browsing behaviors or purchasing behaviors, but their touch behaviors. So similar to ways that people might take their smartphone and try to use like speech recognition. If you ever use these systems, they might ask you to say like, hey, say a few words before you start using the system so that we can calibrate it so that we can recognize your unique vocal patterns, for example. We want to do the same, but we want to look at people's unique touch patterns. And once we can do that, we can build models of their touch behavior and that allow people to have more pleasant, accessible experiences with their touch screens.
I like that. And you think about how much touch screens have become a part of our everyday life. It's not just your mobile device or your tablet. I have an Apple Watch. There's also touch screens on your computer and also television. So this is an area of design that is becoming, this technology is becoming more part of our everyday lives.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, just think about all of the things you might use a touchscreen device for in a given day. So if you're on your smartphone, you might use it to send messages to people, to take photographs, browse social media, play video games. There's all these different things that we do in our day-to-day lives that are now mobile based. So in terms of thinking about technology and the accessibility of technology, especially in the workplace, we have to kind of shift this mindset from thinking of people only sitting at their desk working at their workstation to people doing small bits of work on the bus or doing, replying to a quick email while they're waiting in line for their coffee or things like that. So as these technologies become more and more pervasive, more and more ubiquitous, they're going to seamlessly integrate with what we do in our day-to-day lives. And if we can improve the accessibility of these devices, we can just allow and afford people more freedom and flexibility in how they work, where they work, and the type of work that they want to do.
A lot of this podcast series has been focused on individuals with disabilities, focused on accessibility and also the freelance or the gig economy where your work is kind of more fluid. And I think that having your technology embedded into phones, tablets, kiosks at airports or whatever is going to allow these individuals, to, like you said, to be able to do their work on the go, whether it's a full-time permanent job or something that they're kind of doing, on the side, or maybe it's a full-time job that they're just picking up freelance work for.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I had a situation where one of my study participants was telling me, so he's a DJ, and he was telling me about some software that he wanted to use that's on an iPad, some music, I think it was mixing software or something like that. And he was telling me about it, and he was like, oh, I would love to use it, but I just can't use an iPad. He has cerebral palsy, and iPads just don't work for him. So I think what we really need to look at is, it's not just the access to these devices, it's all of the things that these devices allow us to do, all of the features and applications that they have, and then how we use these features and applications in an increasingly social and connected world. So if you want people to be able to have the flexibility, artists, musicians, other different types of creatives, people who want to create their own businesses or work where and how they would like, we really do need to think about improving the accessibility of mobile technologies, which in our current stage are predominantly touchscreen based, right? So we have our smartwatches, smartphones, our tablets, all of these touch-enabled technologies that could allow people to be able to be more productive, to do more things, to be able to create more connections. But we really need to get the technology there to the point where people feel confident and comfortable using these technologies in a variety of different situations.
I like the example that you provided. And I think a lot of creatives, the iPad or the tablets are so important. I think in design, also as you're drawing or writing notes or using a stylus, it's becoming more touch-based, but these are things that are such an important part of our everyday life and certainly our work. And we go into these workplace situations, like maybe we're giving a PowerPoint presentation and the polling or interaction for the individuals in who are participating in the presentation is done over their mobile device through touch. Having these kind of smart machine learning ways to enhance and make the technology accessible to all is important for everyone.
That's right. And I think when you look at it too, like, yeah, there's a lot of workplace things that that might require access to a smartphone or a tablet. So even things like two-factor authentication. So it might be something that your employer requires you to download something for your phone, so that when you log in, you have to approve the request on your mobile device for the two-factor authentication. I mean, just imagine how much of a struggle that might be if you accidentally hit deny instead of approve when you want to approve a request, or that you just have difficulties in general interacting with kind of these really ubiquitous, systems that we're creating around security or productivity and all these different things.
So interesting about the two-factor, because I've been using Google Authenticator, and so you have to log in, like every time you log into your email or your Twitter or whatever, you have to get to your smartphone, open the Authenticator app, and then there's a code that you have to plug in, but you have to slide through with your touch screen to be able to get all those places. And something like that's easy for me, yeah. Right? But for others, it is probably a really difficult task. That might be almost impossible.
Exactly. Yeah, for some people it might be impossible. For some people, it might take one person, a colleague, 10 seconds, and it might take someone else 5 minutes or a few minutes. So, and I think that's true for like a lot of these different situations. Really looking at productivity in terms of how much time does it take a person to be able to complete a task, and what's the kind of bottleneck between that. So, if you're waiting in line for coffee and you have a few minutes because it's a long line and you want to send an email, that's great. If I have 2 minutes, let me send this email. But if hey, I know this email is going to take me 10 minutes because every time I try to, type on the phone, it always hits the wrong button, or I might experience tremor, so I have difficulty being able to type the email or send it or do all these different things. So if we can look at these technologies in terms of, what do they allow people to do, and then how also is the inaccessibility of these technologies holding people back from being able to accomplish the things they want to do. I think that will give us a better perspective of kind of looking at how these technologies influence not just our, our work lives, but our social lives, and now those things are very interconnected in a lot of different ways too.
Well, let's take a bit of a reset here. This is Jessica Miller-Merrill, and you're listening to the Workology Podcast in partnership with PEAT. Today, we're talking about machine learning and touchscreen accessibility technology with Martez Mont. You can connect with him on Twitter at Martez_Mott. It's MARTEZ_MOTT.
The Workology Podcast Future of Work series is supported by PEAT, the Partnership on Employment and Accessible Technology. PEAT's initiative is to foster collaboration and action around accessible technology in the workplace. PEAT is funded by the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy, ODEP. Learn more about PEAT at peatworks.org. That's PEATWORKS.org.
Let's get back to this. Can you talk about a little bit more about maybe some other examples of technology in terms of accessibility as it relates to work? You had the DJ example, which I think is a great one. Any other ideas in your work?
So there might be certain cases. So there might be examples, let's say at a factory or a warehouse, things like that, where people might have to do inspections or take inventory, and maybe you do these things now using an iPad or some type of tablet that you walk around, or you navigate to these different locations, take notes, or take inventory, things like that. So if there are situations in which kind of the core tenet of your work is mobile based, you're going out into the world doing things. So that may be somebody who's an electrician, for an example, who needs to take instead of wanting to take tons and tons of manual physical documents with you, you might prefer to take an iPad with you with all these documents on it stored with you. But if those technologies, once again, aren't accessible to you, then those might be careers or things that you may want to shy away from because you don't believe that you could do the job adequately, or you might feel self-conscious because you feel that you can't do the job as adequately as some of your colleagues. So I really think it is this notion of there might be these situations in which there are certain jobs that require, just by their nature, uses of mobile devices, mobile technologies. And we have to look at it and say, hey, are these jobs that are inherently mobile based out in the world or out doing things, not just sitting in front of a desk all day, all those type of jobs accessible to people because, the underlying technologies may not be.
I think that's an important point to make. It's not just people who are using tablets, right? It's people who are out there, maybe safety, or they're in a warehouse, or they have a QR. They're responsible for making sure that products are running down the assembly line the right way, or working with pets. Whatever it is, like, you need to be able to use the tools to be successful in your job. One thing I was thinking about as you were talking, I think about like my world in human resources and recruiting. So much of our work for the employee populations, contractors, freelancers, or permanent employees, is done over a mobile device, email. Also, these mobile apps where you can input your time, access your employee directory, log into your company portal, put in your employee hours for the week. They're all done over a mobile device. So having your technology as part of the accessibility tools for your employees is really critical, I think, to these individuals with motor impairments success and the ability to be able to do their job as they should be able to.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, like, do it, how they want to, where they want to. Yeah, like, if you have all these, if you have work-based that's, inherently mobile-based, or that you could do it, using mobile technologies, it's just great to have that flexibility, right? To be able to say, hey, I know I don't have to go into my desk to do this. I can do this right now at the coffee shop, or I can handle this later, when I have a minute or something. So yeah, like, having the flexibility and the freedom to be able to decide, which technologies do you want to use and when and how you want to use them, that's just going to make the workplace more enjoyable and more expressive for people.
What are your thoughts on having, or like, the future plans for your technology, particularly for maybe people who are freelance or gig workers? So let's say that you are trying to go into Fiverr and they have a mobile process for you to be able to, as an individual, like, select work and sign up and even completely your profile. How would a company like Fiverr engage you to be able to add the technology that you're working on and kind of embed that into their current tech stack?
Yeah, so kind of the work that I'm looking at right now is more what I would call application agnostic. So what we're hoping for is to look at the underlying technology and improve it so that if we can, I guess the way I want to think about this is, if we could retrain systems to respond accurately to you and how you want to interact with them, that will then allow any application that runs on top of that technology to be inherently more accessible. So kind of the view or the vision that I have for this research is kind of like an accessibility feature or setting that would be available on touch-enabled devices. So you go out and you buy a new Android tablet or a Microsoft Surface or an iPad or something, and you turn on this accessibility feature, the Smart Touch accessibility feature. We will step you through some type of calibration process where you tap on the screen a few times to give us some examples of what your touch behaviors are like. So this is the analogy again to using the speech recognition software, you saying a few of these kind of preset phrases so that the system can train to be attuned to your voice. We're doing a similar thing. We want to attune to your touch behavior. And once we do that, now any application, whether it be something specific from a specific corporation that's running on the web, or a specific app that you need to download to be able to do your work securely, all of these things now will become more accessible because the underlying technology at the system level, not at the necessarily the application level, but at the system level, is now more accurate. So that's kind of where we want to be able to go. We want to be able to take this technology, be able to put it on these devices, have it just as a feature that people can turn on and use it when they need to and how they need to. And then that will just improve the accessibility of all of the applications and services running on top of the device.
I love it. And I think about, like, I have an Alexa at my house, and it is voice recognized, but it does go through training, right? And I can work with it. And for not just me, but different members of my family within the house, they can talk to Alexa and she gets smarter and then can understand the differences between dialects and how we speak so that she can provide a better experience for us when we ask her for certain things. I feel like you're talking about the same thing, but for these touch-like devices, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. For these touch devices, we need that similar type of affordance. So yeah, you want your, we may not think of it right now, right? So if you use a smartphone right now, it's like, hey, I could use it pretty accurately. Yeah, sometimes when I'm typing a message, I might, hit the wrong key and I have to backspace, but generally it works well for me, right? So you might have that perspective. But then for other people, it's like, oh yeah, it takes me 5 minutes to try to send one text message.
So how do we get your work in front of the mobile phone and the tablet makers? Because is that the solution, like to be able to add this to the iPhone or the Androids or your touch technology at the airport?
Yeah, so I guess my primary way of being able to have that influence is to really like my publication. So I view my role as a doctoral student, but after I graduate as a member of the academic community in general, as to be able to push ideas forward and then hopefully be able to disseminate those ideas to the broader community. And then for the community to take those ideas, refine them and improve them. And then hopefully, the hope is that, I go to a conference and I'm up there giving a presentation about this work. And somebody at Google's in the audience and they're like, oh, wow, that's a great idea. And then they take that back to their team and they actually have the engineering power and prowess to be able to do these things. I'm one graduate student that's trying to work on these things. So I can create kind of like proof of concepts. I can create test beds and algorithms and show in kind of these more limited situations like, hey, this seems to be promising. This may be something that we want to investigate in the future, but I don't have the engineering powerhouse behind me that will allow me to go in and change and make huge changes to software and to be able to update that throughout time. So, imagine me as like one person trying to keep this up to date. And every time there's a new Android update, I have to go back and, update the software again. It's not sustainable for a single person. So that's really where, as academics, we need to rely on industry to kind of do the right thing, to kind of say, hey, you do have some accessibility features and those are great and those are changing people's lives. But, there's more work we can do. There's, more improvements we can make. And getting out, talking to people, trying to be like an evangelist for accessibility and to tell people like, this is important and this, this impacts more people than, they may think.
So Google, Apple, anybody listening that's looking at accessibility options for mobile devices, Martez is got all the research and he's been doing some really great work in this area. So it's something that I think they should consider. I mean, it makes sense to me and it provides a better experience for everyone.
Yeah, and one of the things I think I forgot to mention before. Yeah, so one of the great things about these technologies is that, when you create technologies for people with disabilities or certain types of impairments, you actually do end up improving the technology for everyone. So we talk about these things called situational impairments. You might think that if, let's say if you're trying to send a text message while you're holding grocery bags, for example, you don't have access to your hands as much as you did before, so we would call it like you're situationally impaired at this moment. But if we could create technology that's more accurate for people with Parkinson's disease, then we can also create that makes your cell phone or your smartphone more accurate while you're walking or jogging or while you're riding a bumpy bus or something like that. So there are all these situations in which we could look at it and say like, oh yeah, we live in this mobile world. We're not just sitting at the desk anymore. We have to think about all these different contexts and situations in which we use all these mobile devices. And some of them impair us in these ways. And if we can create technology that helps people with disabilities, that can help a lot of people in general. And that's kind of one of the main hopes of our research, is that we can show that we can have this kind of effect that it's a pretty big return on investment if you focus on accessibility.
So you're a sixth year PhD candidate. So what is next for you and your research?
So I'm still finishing up my dissertation. So I have a few more projects that I'm finishing up over this upcoming academic year. I hope to graduate this year. So that's my focus is on writing the dissertation. And yeah, so yeah, we're just continuing to work on these problems. So I mean, there's so many problems in this space. So just to give you an example, in terms of machine learning typically requires, lots of data points. So, the the more books I buy on Amazon, the more confident Amazon might be in trying to predict what my next book might be. If you buy one book, it may not know much about you, but if you buy 200 books, it may get a pretty accurate representation of the type of book buyer you are. So if we look at that in terms of machine learning for touch interaction, we need to be able to collect a lot of data, and people's abilities change throughout the day. Some people take medication in the morning, so their touch behaviors might be a certain way in the morning, but at night, after it's been a long day, you're tired, you're fatigued, your touch behaviors and your medicine's worn off, your touch behaviors might be quite different. So how can we collect enough data throughout the day, throughout the times that you might be experiencing different effects, so that we can create these more accurate models of what your touch behavior is like? So there's so many different research questions, research directions that this work can go into, and that's kind of what we're working on, is just trying to keep on improving and making these systems better and more accessible.
I didn't even think about like your medication schedule or your energy levels throughout the day, how that might impact your touch as an individual with your mobile device or this technology.
Yeah. Like some people with maybe Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis that experience tremor. Yeah, they might say, when I take my medicine, I have less tremor, but as the day goes on, or if I'm feeling stressed or things like that, I might have episodes where might have more tremor. So yeah, we really need to be able to think about people's abilities not just as a single snapshot of this is who they are, but as a person whose abilities change throughout the day and change with the different contexts. And if we can create systems that can be aware of these things, it will just create better experiences.
Martez, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people go to learn more about you and the research and the work that you're doing?
Thank you for having me. This is great being able to chat with you. So so I'm a PhD student at the University of Washington. So if people want to look me up, you could just kind of look up my Google Scholar, Martez Mont, to see some of my publications, what I'm working on. I'm working on a new website that's going to be martezmont.com, and that should be coming up live probably within the next few weeks or so. So people can definitely check me out there and see what I'm working on.
We'll have some links to some of Martez's publications and different research and interesting work that's being done in this space. So thank you so much for taking the time with joining us.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It's been great.
I loved this conversation, and I think that it's interesting research and programs like these that are really going to push this technology and this accessible and inclusive technology forward. I love how we are looking at technology from different angles, and not just consumer focus, but workplace and productivity focus, which is where I challenge you to sit back and think about how technology, maybe your current stack that you have in your workplace or the tools that you have, can be used to help make the workplace better for all different types of employees. Thank you for joining the Workology Podcast today. It's a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader who's tired of the status quo. This is Jessica Miller-Merrill. Until next time, you can visit Workology.com to listen to all our previous Workology Podcast episodes.
Production services for the Workology Podcast with Jessica Miller-Merrill provided by TotalPicture.com.